Hey guys, Windsor here, and welcome to the Groove Guru podcast. And today I'm recording this, and I'm just back from Glastonbury Festival this past weekend, where I played with Hugh Cornwell, and it was the biggest crowd that I'd played to in quite a while, and it was my second time playing there, which was a lot of fun. And it was something, getting to it, I'd hyped up in my mind for a little while, and actually just turned out to be another gig in the best way. And the real adventure, as I'll get to, started after the show. And today I'm going to reflect on the show and what happened in the weekend, and flow with some themes that can often come up in what I like to share, like wisdom, intuition, fun, and embracing the unknown. So let's have some fun. So yeah, the show, I was playing on Friday with Hugh Cornwell at Glastonbury. We were playing the acoustic stage, and it was the second time that I'd played Glastonbury. The first time was also with you. And again, Glastonbury Festival, it's got quite a big name as far as festivals go, pretty revered. I don't need to tell you that. And, pre-show, it's as I do with my professional musician hat on. I'd done my prep, I'd practiced, and, I was match fit, and, done years of prep, really, not just for this festival, but some of the repertoire tunes that we played, I'd played for years. And so I knew I'd done it, what was required, so I just showed up and let it flow. And it was pretty cool. We played the acoustic stage Friday afternoon, and it was a bigger crowd than we normally play to, which usually is what happens at festivals. And yeah, it was kind of standard festival stuff in a way. You're not always guaranteed great monitors when you play at festival, like my monitors on stage. And if you're listening to this and you're not a musician, monitors are what, musicians, have on stage, speakers so you can hear the band, or in-ears so you can hear what the band are doing. And my monitors didn't work for about the first half of it, and it got sorted about halfway through the show. But again, no big deal. I'm pretty secure in my own abilities. Showed up, listened, played, and we had a lot of fun. And, afterwards I got one of those audience photographs of Glastonbury. Quite a cool moment that I'd imagined doing for a while. And yeah, it was really, really good fun. And we got another festival in a few months, and a UK tour later on this year, where we'll be playing the whole of the Hugh Cornwell album Nosferatu that Hugh recorded with drummer Robert Williams, who played with Captain Beefheart. He's most known for that. And it's quite bonkers, actually. There's a lot of really unconventional drum parts, things that I would never think to play. And musically, it's very quirky, and that should be a lot of fun too. So yeah, Glastonbury was a blast, really, really, really cool show. And what also turned out to be really cool is that when we were doing it, we'd planned to be in and out, like a bunch of driving, probably about 5-6 hours travel time, and be set up and plan for this 40-minute set. And then afterwards, we'd plan to be leaving pretty much straight after. And what happened though, when we got to the festival, we got our passes, the ticket. The lady was like, well, okay, there's your pass, and there's your wristband, and you've got your weekend ticket, and that's all sorted. And I was like, wait, weekend ticket? And it hadn't occurred to me that was going to be happening. So I thought, weekend at Glastonbury. So I reflected a bit, and I thought, okay, where am I going to sleep? Can I charge my phone? Blah, blah, blah. So reflected for a little while. And then I realised that, okay, I can have a weekend at Glastonbury. It's just me, my backpack, a water bottle, and a phone. Fun accepted. So the answer was yes, and I chose to dive into the unknown with it. And it was very cool. And so hung out at Glastonbury for pretty much all of the weekend and got to see some really amazing, fun acts in no particular order. 1975 were great. Alanis Morissette. Got to see some reggae greats. Black Uhuru. That was really cool. Bass hitting you in the chest. I could go on and on and on, but it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. And again, it was one of those weekends that was just very, very synchronous that, it was almost like everything that I wanted showed up. Everything from, okay, what am I going to do when my phone runs out and I don't have a charger? Then a few minutes later, I walked and I found a phone charger. I was like, oh, thank you for that. And wondering about where to sleep. I actually met a friend that I hadn't seen in about 15 years. And she was like, oh, wow, great to see you. Oh, and as it so happens, I've got my camper van and tent and I've got a bedroom pretty much in there if you want to sleep there for the weekend. And I was like, yes, please. So that was cool. And just a lot of synchronous meetings, and it was pretty magical. I mean, I met Gandalf, Sir Ian McKellen, and I did not expect that. And, the magic and synchronicity of it all that can often happen when we dive into the unknown indeed did happen. And the idea for this episode came from it as well. And so what was really cool, just as I'm reflecting on it, is over the weekend there was a lot of warmth and kindness everywhere. And by warmth, I'm not just talking about sun, and I certainly did catch some, but there was a lot of friendliness with all the people that I met there. I caught more smiles than I can remember doing in recent times. It was never a problem to get anywhere, any position at any of the stages that I want to. There was just a very relaxed vibe there within myself, and I noticed that with a lot of the people there too. Because again, when people go to festivals, it's usually like a permission slip, and people have the intention just to let go and forget all their other stuff that's happening in the world and just relax and enjoy yourself. And that's one of the reminders that came up, was that that really what we're looking for to enjoy yourselves is a beautiful feeling, which again comes from when we let go of a lot of the noise and a lot of the stressful thinking that we have about things, and are thinking about thinking, blah, 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 blah. And when that settles down, we find that equilibrium that is that true enjoyment of life. Now, another really cool thing that showed up for me was it was an alcohol-free Glastonbury for me. Just recently I just thought, okay, it occurred to me, I won't go too into it, but just that, I really want to take an indefinite break from alcohol. Just some reflections that I'd been having that, what I share quite a lot if you listen to these kind of podcasts and my output, and if ever you've worked with me coaching and mentoring in that capacity, you realize that it's what we're all looking for when it comes to our feeling and ground of being is very much an internal state. Yet the way we're conditioned is we look for an internal state in some kind of external situation or substance or activity, which shows up for people as alcohol, drugs, sex, porn, shopping, blah 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 blah. And just that has been marinating and hit me really, really deeply, that that I'm good. I don't need external stuff to cope and be okay, because I'm built that way. Always okay. Always more okay than anything, I think. And I thought also with some of the acts and work that I've done, artists from the punk rock era, I thought it's quite a punk thing actually, just to rebel against that debauchery associated with it all. But here's the thing, a few years ago I thought going to Glastonbury and alcohol free. It's like, oh, that's boring. And how would I do it? Because that's what you do at things like that. Well, it was surprisingly easy to do so. And even though, walking around, every other person was drinking something or smoking something, there really wasn't tempted. Sure, maybe a few thoughts popped up and a few cravings, but as I see it, that's just noise. And that kind of noise, mental noise, and the feelings attached to it, they come up for everyone about various things, but it's optional to listen to that. And again, it's that thing when you realize that what you're looking for you to enjoy life fully and show up at your best is an internal state that doesn't come from those externals. Now, it was really cool. There's a lot of wisdom and a lot of insights percolated over the weekend. Again, one that you can plan stuff, but often when you plan stuff, even if it's the best plan in the world, things don't work out always according to plan. So you got to adjust and course correct. And again, some things obviously require planning, and I'm not against planning. And even though I talk about beyond the intellect stuff, intellect can be useful. Though where we're most resourceful is when we're trusting that deeper intelligence that knows how to use all the stuff and integrate and respond to what shows up, even when we plan, better than just rigidly adhering to the plan. And again, planning, I can't do what I do professionally, for example, with Hugh, without planning and learning things. So for example, if we're playing material and staying true to the original, I've got to analyze that and pick it apart and pay attention to the details of the part, know the form inside out, know all the lyrics, and have it all memorized, etc. So yeah, I do a lot of mental prep to show up knowing that I can. But here's the thing, is even when you do a lot of mental prep as a musician, to fully be at your best and present and listening, not listening to your thinking, but just to the group as a whole, you need to let go of all the noise. Yeah. So that's really key. And that's one of those performance keys that keeps showing up more and more and more when it comes to performing at my best in music and when doing other things in life, is just really waking up to being present, which is where the magic really happens. And a recent reflection on this is, that's something that came really, really easy to me and that I took for granted, that pretty much always when I've played music, I'd be playing music with whoever it is I've been playing with. And, in the process of that, yes, thoughts come up, and a lot of those can be distracting and can be quite irrelevant as well. But realizing that that's not helpful to listen to that, naturally, I let go of that and open to what's actually happening and do what needs to be done that way. It was a real revelation and quite a tremendously helpful insight to realize that, okay, not just on the bandstand does thought do its thing and come up, but in every other aspect of life. We're always thinking, we're always having mental activity, we're always creating experiences and feelings. And just the way it works, a lot of our thought and conditioning is not helpful. It's just noise in the system that, quite frankly, you don't need to listen to. And when we see that and actually live from that way and just let our thought flow and not obsess about it, we've got much more creative bandwidth in the moment to, one, have a more enjoyable experience, two, to have a much more ease-filled experience where, we listen better, we're more naturally creative when we create a space for new, fresh, helpful perspective to come up. And we're more relaxed and we're more at ease. And again, there's a great lesson I learned when I was studying and practicing karate, that in karate there's a phrase that a tense muscle is a slow one. You know, if you're holding unnecessary tension in your body, you know, you don't punch as effectively, you're not, it slows you down. And at the heart of all our experiences, you know, when we hold on to tense and stressful thinking, and a lot of people do that habitually without realizing it, and it's not really until we start to let go and understand how well we're made that beneath that there's a much simpler and more ease-filled, wise way to show up. That, you know, it gets back to, you know, when the more we let go of thought in performance and the more we let go of thought in life, you know, we're at our best to respond to whatever shows up with our real-time intelligence in the moment. And as I see it, you know, there's nothing more helpful and also practical than that. Okay. Now, you know, again, when it comes to looking in this direction, this, you could say, self-realization, and the more being trusting of the wisdom that's in you, there's one of my favorite quotes that's been coming up recently. It's by Saint Francis of Assisi, which is, what you're looking for is who's looking. And it's a pointer to that self-awareness that we are always experiencing mental activity and having an experience that's coming from thought. And when we see that playing out, okay, we can see that often we jump on trains of thought. You know, some of them are, oh, that's a nice train to get on, and we get on it. And sometimes the trains of thought are not so nice. You know, it's, I call them sometimes the trains to Sucksville. You know, it happens, me too. But it's that understanding that you are the thinker, and just that little, the smallest subtle glimpse you have of that you're the one thinking. And when you notice that in real time, that your experience is coming from you and not outside, then it creates a little bit of space, and that realization, no matter how subtle, is really the key to ground you in this space of presence where you're listening and where all the cool stuff shows up in. Okay. And to go even deeper with that, you know, it's also that realization that, you know, you're, and it might sound a bit deep for some listening, but it's that you stop identifying as much with you and your ego as who you are. And even beyond the physical, you actually realize that you're more life itself, the essence of life itself, showing up, experiencing itself via your avatar, the body that you're currently in. And another way of saying that is you are the intelligence behind life that's playing out constantly, that knows how to guide you in real time in everything that you do, in any conversation, in any gig, in any situation. And again, the less you kind of are preoccupied with the noise in the system and know that the form of that, you know, underneath it, there is a formless, and both are parts of the same whole. When you show up from that calm space, it guides you. It guides you. It guides you. You know what to do. You see the next thing to do. Okay? And what's really cool is, you know, with a little bit of intention as well, it can be a wonderful combination. And as a little experiment just to have fun with, you know, just take a moment to get still. Just notice what's happening in the room. And, you know, just, and again, it can be clear, very useful just to have this intention of what you want to create. And just think, you know, what do you want to create now? And notice what shows up for you. And see what occurs to you. Okay? And when you notice what arises, just be receptive to that. If you want to make a note to remind you what you want to create, and that can be really useful, having a clear outcome that you want. You can let that be a compass for you. But then also just let yourself be present. And when you fall from your head to your heart, which is just a metaphor for letting go of the noise, trust your intuition and heart that knows how to guide you. And in my experience, that's where all the creative juice comes from. And all the ideas that are readily accessible to us when we have the vision and know where to look. So, as an invitation, play with that. And in the process, just notice when you can let go of thinking that's unhelpful. And again, we're so well made that we have this compass, which is our feeling. And we can tell when we're too preoccupied up here in our head and in our thoughts because of the feeling. And quite simply, the more emotional we are, the less clear we are. So the more emotional you are, be more wary of listening to and trusting what shows up in your thoughts. All right. Again, play with this. And I'm sure you can also remember, times that you've been much clearer and when there's been less on your mind and things have just flowed better than you previously imagined. Well, that's the invitation, Yes, be clear on what you want, but also allow yourself to embrace that space of, I don't know, and see what shows up. And the more you do that, and the more you learn to trust that, it's the space in which it's been coming up recently, the phrase predictably miraculous shows itself. And again, the feeling that comes from that is quite tremendous as well. So I'm going to bring this to a close. Glastonbury was an absolute blast. Really great to connect, meet a lot of new people. Great to play another show and just share a lot of joy with people over the weekend. So rounding this one up, just a few quick reminders. If you want to dive deeper into the kind of thing that I explore, I recently released a new course. It's called Back to Clarity, How to Get Back in Balance When You're Caught in Thought, that explains and dives deeper into some of this stuff and much more. And also re-released my Excelsior Basics drum course, the Ultimate Drumming Fundamentals course, which is a distillation of the best of the essentials, music and drumming wise, that I find helps set people up to win and having the best foundation possible for moving forward. And you can check out both of those at windsordrums.com/courses. And for now, I'm going to keep it simple and just say, thanks for listening. Have fun. Wake up to the music of life and trust your intuition. And I'll speak with you soon.